We're gonna get to the point. Happy 4th of July, or happy late 4th of July to every single one of y'all. 250-year anniversary for the United States of America, and that's cool. Other than that though, Southline updated literally on 4th of July, and they did a slight map expansion. And personally, out of all the updates I've seen in Southline, I think this one has to be the most creative one. Because in this update, we actually got a fictional railroad museum, which is personally probably one of the most creative updates that Southline probably made. And well, not only that, the Zenith area got a little bit of a map expansion too. Intermodal terminals should look a lot more different. And then not only that, since they also added this fictional railroad museum, they also added a museum railway game pass, which is gonna be 150 Robux, not too much. Other than that, if you like this video, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Make sure to follow my TikTok, and make sure to join my Discord server because we're almost at 500 members there. Other than that, enough with the yapping, and let's get in today's video. So we're gonna start off here at the Southline Diamond, and the first thing you're gonna notice is that this industry right here looks a lot more different. Looks like they finally revamped the grain silos, and they look a lot more better. And well, as you walk deeper into the Zenith subdivision, you could see that there's a lot more details, like these lampposts that you see. And well, here's another industry that fairly looks a little bit different. If I remember correctly, this used to be a single track industry, and now there's 2 extra tracks. So now this industry is bigger and more cargo can fit in this industry. And well, it looks like we got another grain industry that was revamped as well. And well, now we got a lot more differences here. Over here, as you could see, we got this nice looking signal tower, and then we got this extremely ginormous lake. From the looks of it, it looks pretty man-made. And well, right here we got the Millard milling industry, which is for the grain trains as well. The Southline Zenith area is pretty much flooded with a bunch of these grain industries. And well, over here we got this overpass, and well, as you're walking, you're gonna see a bunch of houses. And well, it looks like they added a road, and right next to the road there's a bunch of power lines. Liking these small details, but as you could see, it looks like we stumbled across a town. And well, it looks like we found another industry right here. Zenith Transload is what I seen. And well, honestly, I don't know what this industry is, but by the looks of it, I'm seeing a bunch of these trailers, these tanker trailers. So this could be a oil industry? Comment down below because I have no clue what I'm talking about. And well, this little town has its own train station. And well, this small little train station is owned by South Dot, Southline's fictional commuter railroad. And well, it has this little like electronic dialogue that says, "Be safe, watch for approaching trains." Pretty cool. And this little train station also has a cool little roundabout. And well, this building looks pretty cool. And right next to this train station, we got this awesome looking train bridge that crosses over this decently large river. Well, after passing that bridge, you could see that there's a siding here, and well, you should know where this siding leads to. And well, if you guessed Zenith Terminal, you are completely right. And look at how many containers we have here. Holy crap. And well, behind Zenith Terminal, it looks like we got a couple more industries here. It looks like this one's, I have no clue what this is. From the looks of it though, it's a supplier company. And well, we got 2 of these ginormous looking warehouses. Wondering what these companies are, because dang, these warehouses are huge. And well, we're back to Zenith Terminal, and as you could see, most of these shipping containers are all from EMP. I noticed too that nearly most of these container stacks are pretty high up. So not gonna lie, I don't know how these little itty bitty machines could stack up containers that high. And well, over here we got more of these machines here. And well, it looks like the main line here has a siding. And well, as I run to the other end of the siding, I actually did not notice this other giant warehouse that's like right here. And then we got another industry here that's actually new to the game. My guess that's another grain industry? I'm not sure. And well, that's all the stuff that we've covered here in the Zenith area that it's been revamped so far. And well, now since we're done with the Zenith part of the map, now let's get into the actual cool stuff that y'all been waiting for. And well, over here is gonna be the Southline Railway Museum. And well, if you go on one of these roads, you could see that they actually have their own logo. And well, I'm not gonna lie, this may be one of the coolest things that Southline has ever created, actually. And well, it looks like that this museum has been a thing for 70 years. Dang, this museum is low-key older than me. And well, unfortunately, this is gonna be the only way a train could actually get inside the railroad museum, which is unfortunate, not gonna lie. And by the looks of it, on one half of the museum, it's nothing but plains, cornfields, and just emptiness. But over here's where the real cool stuff happens. And as you could see, I have no clue what this place is, but I'm pretty sure it's like to showcase locomotives and stuff. And well, this place also has a nice little green train station. And well, over here we're gonna look at our first shed that actually has the Southline Railroad Museum logo. And well, we got 3 more sheds here that are actually opened and have an interior, as you could see. And well, I'm pretty sure these 3 large sheds are gonna be the only ones that's gonna have an interior. And well, this one also has really nice looking lights. And well, like I said, there's 3 big ones, which is like from largest to smallest. And well, here we got another little small shed, a pretty long one too. And well, over here we got a little small diamond. And well, if you haven't noticed, but this museum's trackage is actually a loop. Well, here's how the entire museum looks like, and it's a pretty massive property too. But you could see that the largest, what looks to be an oval, is actually a loop. And well, now since we covered on some parts of Zenith and the museum, now let's cover the locomotives. And well, there's a new game pass in the game. It's called the Southline Railroad Museum Game Pass, and that's gonna cost you 150 Robux, which isn't bad. But we'll start out with the least coolest locomotive, which is gonna be the C&W SD40-2. This locomotive was built in 1974, and it was under the Chicago and Northwestern Railway back in the day. And its original number was C&W 6847. And this locomotive continued its life as a C&W locomotive until 1995, where the C&W was acquired by the Union Pacific Railroad. And well, luckily, the farthest that UP did to actually rebrand this locomotive was actually just give it a few patches. So now this locomotive was now known as UP 3028. And well, this locomotive would last a couple years on the Union Pacific until 2009. It was finally donated to the IRM. And well, C&W 6847 was saved from extinction. The locomotive is also known for having the bells mounted on the nose. And well, when you hear the bell, it's just gonna sound like an old mechanical railroad crossing bell. But overall, here's how the horn and the bell is gonna sound like. The next thing is going to be a Chicago and Northwestern GP9. Now, I've done some research, and I don't know if I did enough, but I don't see any information about this locomotive on the internet that some museum preserved it. If anything, the IRM does actually have a C&W high hood locomotive. Overall, though, I'm starting to notice a pattern that this railroad museum actually is very packed with C&W locomotives. Guessing this locomotive was saved like many years ago. But I mean, the model looks cool, but I'm still really clueless if this thing is actually based off a real locomotive or not. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's based off this one. Comment down below if I'm right or wrong. Overall, here's how the horn sounds. Alright, the next locomotive is actually going to be C&W 411, and this one is actually based off C&W 411. Built back in 1949, this locomotive was actually built for freight service. If I'm not mistaken, this locomotive actually had a different number, but back in 1971 it was renumbered, and then it started doing commuter rail service just like what Metro does nowadays. Oh, and if you're wondering what locomotive this is the EMD F7A, and Metro actually took ownership of this locomotive back in the late 70s, and it was now known as Metro 305, and it lasted a couple years on Metro until they retired it back in 1999. And then that same year it was later gifted to the IRM, and well, they fully restored it back to its former glory. That's a crazy lore behind this locomotive. No horn review because it's gonna have the same horn as the C&W GP9, and the bell is actually gonna have the same horn as the SD40-2 that we just reviewed not too long ago. The next thing is gonna be this Milwaukee Road F7A. If I'm not mistaken, this one is supposed to be based off 118C, because that one was actually preserved by the IRM, but the one we're looking at, which is 115, is actually scrapped, unfortunately. But we're gonna use 118 story. So this one was actually built back in 1951 by the Milwaukee Road Railroad, and this one was primarily supposed to be for heavy haul freight train. And if I'm not mistaken, unlike the C&W, this one actually stuck with freight train service until it was finally retired back back in 1984. And in that same year, the locomotive was gifted to the IRM. And nowadays, that locomotive runs excursions now for the Railroad Museum. Now, unfortunately, this is going to be the last F7 unit we're going to see, but this one is going to be Southline 309. Now, in reality, this locomotive is based off Metra 309, an EMD F7A that they acquired from the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. If I'm not mistaken, Metra had a fleet of 20 of these locomotives. Most of them probably met their demise years later, but some were fortunate, like CNW 411, the one that we just talked about, and this locomotive, but it actually kept its Metra paint scheme. But I'm guessing since they already have a fictional commuter rail to be exact, in Southline, it's now Southline 309. Of course though, I'm guessing the in-game lore also has to do something with the IRL lore that we have on these locomotives. This one might be one of the most random locomotives in this Game Pass, but here we got the Santa Fe B unit. Funny thing enough, it's just a B unit. There's no ATSF F unit at all. It's just a B unit. And well, I done a little bit of research, and there was actually a railroad museum that has preserved a B unit from the Santa Fe Railroad. So I'm not too sure, but I'm guessing that this is an EMD F7B, and well, as you see, it's a cabless locomotive, but it's still considered a locomotive. Unlike a slug, this one actually has motors, prime mover, all of that, just doesn't have a cab. Overall though, my guess is that these used to hook up on the Super Chief back in the day, or on any F7 unit that the Santa Fe had. And well, I'm guessing this locomotive is supposed to be based off 347B, because that exact locomotive was actually preserved in a railroad museum in California. Either way though, I really like this logo. Love that Native American wearing that war bonnet. Unfortunately, this one doesn't have a horn. Now, we covered all of the F units. Now let's cover the last GP9, and this one is gonna be by the Burlington route. I tried to find information if there was any preserved GP9s that was formerly part of the Burlington route in railroad museums, by the way, and I didn't find any good examples. So I'm assuming that nobody got to preserve any Burlington route GP9s. So my guess is that this locomotive isn't based on anything. They just want to add it in to the museum. And well, this is a pretty cool looking unit. Nice paint scheme as well. Overall though, no horn review, because it's gonna have the same horn as a C&W GP9 and the F units. And now the next thing is gonna be the Burlington Northern F45s. After doing some research, this locomotive is actually surprisingly interesting, because this exact locomotive, Burlington Northern 6644, was the second to last F45 built ever. And if you're wondering, it was built in April of 1971. And well, during its life, it was a Burlington Northern locomotive, and I think it was sold to another railroad company, and then it was sold to the Montana Rail Link. And well, once it was acquired by MRL, it was obviously rebranded to MRL 390. And well, MRL 390 was actually gonna go to the scrap until it was sold to a private owner last minute for it to be preserved. So I'm pretty sure this locomotive still has the MRL paint scheme. But overall, that's some cool information that I did not know about BN 6644. And well, unfortunately, the horn doesn't work. It may have a horn after I post this video, but I don't know. It had no horn when I was recording this. And well, the last locomotive we're gonna review is gonna be the Atlanta Southern ST50. Now, this is a fictional railroad, so I can't really say much, but this is an ST50, which is a really rare locomotive to see nowadays. This locomotive practically ruined EMD's reputation back in the day. So this is some interesting history that some railroad museums would love to have. And well, not gonna lie, this paint scheme looks really cool actually. And well, the only thing I will say is that the roof of this locomotive has a bunch of these weird looking wires and boxes on top of the cab. If you have any idea why this locomotive needs this, comment down below. And well, here's how the horn of the locomotive sounds. And well, this is going to be it for today's video. I know there was a little bit more to cover, but I just wanted this video to mainly be about the little revamp that happened in Zenith and then the Southline Railroad Museum. And well, personally, I could safely say that this may be one of Southline's most creative and funnest updates that I've probably ever seen in a while actually. I kind of forget that you could still be creative with a train game, because you know, there's not that much to really do besides adding tracks and making the freaking map look detailed. And not only making making a museum, you also add locomotives with the museum, which is pretty cool. Overall though, the Southline Railroad Museum Game Pass is gonna cost you 150 Robux, so it isn't even a bad Game Pass price at all. But overall, what do you think about this update? Do you think this update's cool? Do you think this update's trash? Comment down below. But anyways, if you like this video, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Make sure to follow my TikTok, and we'll make sure to join my Discord because we're almost at 500 members there. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye and have a great day. Bye bye.